And what we've seen since then is that as performance in those areas has declined, so support for the ANC has declined as well. And it is no longer seen as the party able to deliver on jobs, on growth, and on services.
A couple of weeks ago, the economic freedom fighters engaged in a proposed national shutdown of the South African economy. Fortunately, it resulted in a bit of a damp squib effect. This is the term used by the CEO of the Institute of Race Relations, Dr. John Endres. He joined me today, and we're going to discuss why the shutdown didn't take place, maybe as many expected, some of the reasons behind that, and perhaps some of the lessons and opportunities for the opposition parties as we head towards the general election in 2024. John, thanks very much for being with me today. You highlight two main reasons for the damp squib phenomenon in a recent article of yours on Business Day, which I will link to in the description below. The first reason that you mention is this rhetoric of the EFF that falls flat, mostly amongst South African voters, especially the youth maybe. Could you highlight this a little bit, unpack why you think this is the case?
So I think that in South Africa, we've got the benefit of having a fairly moderate and even conservative population in the main, which is revealed to us in some of the polling that we do. And contrary to public perceptions, most South Africans, I think, are not revolutionaries. They're not keen on the overthrow of the existing order and the replacement with an uncertain new order. But instead, they are quite moderate in their attitudes and preferences. And what they tell us they would like to see being addressed as the main preoccupations in South Africa are things like unemployment, which has been the top-rated issue for as long as we've been running surveys asking this question. And the second-rated, most important topic would generally be something related to service delivery, like electricity, obviously, water, education, health and housing, or safety and security and anti-corruption. So those are the things that people really care about. And that is, we think, maybe not quite something that the EFF is able to communicate convincingly on.
And John, the EFF, they tend to campaign, or at least the rhetoric is on things like racism, land reform, that sort of thing. In terms of institute surveys, institute polling, what do the numbers show us there that respondents, ordinary South Africans, well, how do they feel about those issues?
So what our respondents tell us is not that these things are completely irrelevant. The way we ask the question is that we say, tell us what the two biggest issues are that you think should be solved in South Africa. And then people can tell us those two things. And the things I mentioned earlier, like unemployment, service delivery, and crime and safety, so law and order, in other words, always are at the top of the list. And what we find right at the bottom of the list are things like inequality, racial and gender inequality, racism, and land reform. And those are the very specific issues on which the EFF campaigns the hardest. And we think that there's a certain misalignment between this focus on the part of the EFF and what voters in South Africa actually care about. And probably a party that campaigns convincingly on the top-ranked issues should find far more support than one that campaigns on the lower-ranked issues, as the EFF does.
John, to tie in there to what you finished there now with the second lesson or the second thread that you highlighted from the national shutdown that wasn't a shutdown, as it were. So this opportunity for opposition parties to tap in to this voter block. I mean, it's easy to talk about voter blocks, that sort of thing, but I'm going to use it in this case. But sort of that block that is underserved, where they don't feel that their concerns are being met at this point in time by political parties. Do you think there's a recognition of that opportunity? Are you seeing the right sort of moves in that direction? Maybe some of the risk points for those opposition parties in next year's election?
I think in a sense, our politics is not as complicated as it is sometimes made out to be. And that, if you are a political party able to deliver on the top issues, you should be rewarded for that. And we can see that historically. If we look at the ANC's performance, for example, since 1994, there was a certain period in the first 14 years or so, between 1994 and 2007, 13, 14 years, when the ANC was delivering on jobs. They created about over 5 million jobs in the economy during that time. The growth rate topped out above 5%. Public finances were quite well managed. And the ANC support increased during those years from 62% or thereabouts to almost 70%. So the party got rewarded for that. And what we've seen since then is that as performance in those areas has declined, so support for the ANC has declined as well. And it is no longer seen as the party able to deliver on jobs, on growth, and on services. And that is where the opportunity lies. That's a very simple calculation. You've got to be a party that, if you're not in power, is able to convincingly explain how you are going to achieve results in those areas. And if you are in power, you have to deliver on those things. We think that the support that the DA enjoys, for example, in the Western Cape, can be linked to the fact that it has convincingly displayed its ability to deliver on those key issues, and it is being rewarded for that. If we look ahead to the 2024 elections, the opportunity is there to be taken by any political party that wants to. The ANC could grab that opportunity, the EFF can grab it, the reform or opposition coalition partners could grab that opportunity, and that is what they should be doing. That is what they should be focusing on. They need to explain to the South African voter how your policies, your party's policies, are going to make lives better for people in terms of jobs, service delivery, and law and order. And if you can do that, then you can attract the vote. The EFF, we think, is not doing that convincingly, and that is also reflected in the polling figures and in support for activities like the national shutdown, where South Africans said, look, we've already got quite a lot of lawlessness in South Africa. Here we've got the EFF calling for a shutdown and threatening with businesses being looted, people being intimidated, being harassed if they dare to turn up to work. And we actually, as voters, don't like that, which is why we're not participating. And that is a good sign for South Africa's democratic future.
John, this is, as a final question, maybe a roadblock for those opposition parties, even those that get their messaging and their proof of concept maybe right, is this issue of rising absentee voters. What are you seeing there in terms of the polling, the surveys, those trends? Do you think this could continue next year? As I'm not being the interviewer, I'm not subject to the questions here, so I can put you on the spot and ask you if you think this trend will continue next year, maybe.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing reflected in declining voter turnout is the fact that people are not convinced that their vote is going to make the difference that they want to see. So in other words, they're telling us in the surveys they want to see jobs being created, they want services to be delivered, they want load shedding to end, of course, and they also care about law and order. They don't think that the ANC can give that to them, so the ANC voters are staying home. But many voters are also not convinced that opposition parties can deliver on that, which is why many voters, instead of switching their vote, say from the ANC to one of the opposition parties, are rather just not voting at all. And to change that, what it requires, of course, is exactly for that message to be convincingly transmitted and then also shown in practical reality in municipalities, in provinces, wherever opposition parties find themselves in government. They have to show that they're able to deliver on these things. And then we would see the voter turnout beginning to increase again, because people will feel that it makes a difference who they vote for.
Thank you very much for watching. Let us know in the comment section below what you think was behind the EFF's proposed national shutdown not really taking off as they would have intended, and also your thoughts on how things are trending towards the elections in 2024. Until next time, this has been Chris Hattingh for the Centre for Risk Analysis. Take care.